Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. To hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. The hope that is in us, not just a squishy sense of wish. Oh, I hope it doesn't rain today, or I hope there's something good for lunch, but something strong and something concrete. That when God makes a promise, he keeps it. Period. Full stop. The end. For he who promised is faithful. It is God himself who has offered us this hope. Something that's strong and reliable. Something that is full of assurance and secure. And if it's a promise made by God himself, we can take it to the bank. We can do better than take it to the bank. You take a promise to the bank. Have you been in a bank recently? It is a promise that we can take to our graves. And a promise that we can take beyond. This life is not the end. That's a promise. The sufferings of this life are not the end. That's a promise. The difficulties, the frustrations, the weakness, the sadness, the sorrowness, the death, that is not the end. That's a promise. The good things of life, the things that make us happy, the things that fill us with delight and joy and friends and family and relationships and all the stuff that we're going to, hold hands around a turkey on Thursday and talk about what we're thankful for. All of those things, they're not the end. But all of them a part of a promise to something that is greater and deeper and more lasting still. A promise that says that these things, good, bad, or indifferent, are not the end. The sufferings or the happiness of this world are not the end. There will come a time where we will see him face to face and heart to heart and soul to soul, and we'll be connected one to another and to God in life everlasting. Which is not just, and it keeps going and going and going. No, that's the wrong concept of everlasting. When we say life everlasting in the presence of God, we mean something strong and secure. We mean something powerful and good. We mean that hope fulfilled. We mean that the sorrow of this life wiped away, never to be seen again. No more tears, no more suffering, no more death. The good things of this life and the happiness and the joys, they are not only present, but they're real and they're lasting. The good things and the joys of this life have actually been pointing to something beyond themselves. Even the joys of this life will one day fade away, like the suffering will too. But what we will be left with is what they have been showing us all along. The glory of God, and his presence and his love, and his power and his grace. And face to face and heart to heart and soul to soul, and you and me and all of us bound together and in fellowship with him, and it will be forever and forever and forever. That is a hope that is strong and secure, that you can take to the grave because you can take it beyond, and we can take that hope with strength and assurance because of the one who made the promise. I'm not making you the promise because I'll break it. Or I won't follow through, or I'll forget, or I'll do it the wrong way, or whatever it is that I have the tendency to do to let folks down. It's not coming from me, and it's not even coming from each other, but it comes from God himself. A promise that the good things of this life endure. A promise that the sad things of this life will be redeemed. A promise that even through our deaths we will find life in him and with each other, and it will be good. It's something that we might look forward to, something we might be able to give thanks for, and something that will last forever. This is the sort of promise that we were talking about taking a secure hope in. That as we struggle, or as we suffer, as things are hard, or as things are difficult. Imagining Hannah from our first reading, desperate for a child, though she cannot conceive, no matter what they do. And she's there, and she's praying, and she prays, and she prays, and she prays, to the point where she's just kind of moving her mouth, and her heart is almost too filled with prayers of anguish. And Eli the priest is like, isn't it a little early there, Hannah? Because he thinks that she's just nuts, or she's drunk, or whatever, but to be so filled with hurt, to be so filled with worry or with pain, where our hearts are just sort of bursting out. We can't even speak the prayers, but they just kind of spill out of our souls. If that's ever happened, this is the sort of promise, and this is the sort of promise maker we are talking about, who hears those sorts of prayers of anguish, who knows us in our time of suffering and sorrow, who hears us and who answers. Hannah is answered. Hannah conceives. Hannah has a son. Hannah has Samuel. Samuel's a mighty prophet. Samuel will be the anointer of kings. And it comes through a woman who just, her heart is so broken, all she can do is mumble in her prayers, but God hears her nonetheless. And he hears us too. That's the sort of promise we're talking about. That's the sort of promise that we ought to be holding on to unswervingly, with that kind of hope. That kind of hope. For a God who hears us in the hard times, who sees us in the hard times, and who answers us, because these hard times, and even the good ones, it's not the end. That's the promise. It's not the end. And so we've had the opportunity for, I guess, it's like been 3 Sundays now. The lectionary has given us a very sort of interesting course here, as the Gospel of Mark, with where Jesus and his disciples are in Jerusalem, running parallel with the epistle to the Hebrews. And I got to say, last week for me, it was particularly powerful and particularly timely. So you were hearing about the widow's mite, I think, and the disciples, they were there at the temple. They're like, whoa, this place it's amazing. They're just like, they're fishermen. And they go to the temple, and it's huge. And so they're super impressed. And so Jesus starts teaching about the nature of what is really true and real and lasting. And last week with the widow's mite, and it's, it looks like she gives so very little. But because it represents everything of how important and significant it truly is. The outside appearance does not convey the entire message. And so last Sunday, only probably a couple hours after you guys had service, I had the opportunity to celebrate the Eucharist with our tour group. And we were in Jerusalem. We had just been to the temple a couple of days before. We were like a mile away from those same stones that Jesus talked about, the disciples marveled over, that he prophesied not one would be left on top of another. And it happened. Less than 40 years after the disciples are so impressed, and Jesus says not one stone will be left upon another. Well, the Jews revolt, the Romans crush them, and the temple is destroyed. I mean, this huge, massive, immense building, and it's gone. The Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, that's basically all that's left. It's the piece of one wall of an outside courtyard. And the rest of it is, they found pieces marked from the temple in the Colosseum in Rome. That's how scattered this building was, is they just sort of destroyed it, demolished it, and it was spread out all over the place. And it seems impossible when you consider the scope of how big this place was, how important, how holy it was, but there came a time and it was all gone. And I'm there, I just touched it a couple of days before, and there, a mile away, and I'm reading the same reading you guys got about the temple, and I'm reading the same readings that you guys got about Hebrews and what the temple really means. And we have it again this morning. And this parallel course between the Gospels and between Hebrews, pointing out in this very powerful, this very profound way, A difference between what we're seeing, what we can perceive, what we can understand, but what something actually means. So I'm assuming you can come up with a scenario or a recollection of some time where you thought you saw something, but you didn't really understand all of it. There was something sort of underneath the surface. You thought you sort of understood a scenario or a circumstance or a person maybe, but then you got to know them and there's depth there, or you learned more about the circumstance. Oh, I had that totally backwards. That the cover of the book did not match the inside, right? That there's something about what we might see and know and understand and perceive that's not the whole story. And so this is where I see these parallel courses running between the gospel and between Hebrews. Between a temple which was mighty and magnificent. I'll tell you, I had no sense of how big that thing was. It was huge. There's this real beautiful model at a local museum. It's a 1/50th scale of the old city of Jerusalem. Amazing. But the detail is just remarkable. But one of the things you can't help but notice, the temple just dominates everything. It's so huge, and it's so big. It's bigger, it's taller, it's massive than everything else. I mean, I've read Leviticus. I've seen, the dimensions for Solomon's temple. It didn't seem like it was that much. Well, the second temple, Ezra's temple, that thing was big. It was big. There is no doubt people like the disciples could walk up and just go, whoa. I mean, those stones are big. I mean, I marvel at it to consider how they move them around. There's no power tools, there's no cranes. Those blocks of stone are massive. How do they even manage this? It's really remarkable just to consider it. And so the disciples would be thinking the same thing. It's super impressive. But the outside building, what they could see and what they could touch, what seems so important, Jesus is saying is not the end of it. It's actually not what's most important, because these big, beautiful stones are all going to be destroyed. This place that's been a center of worship, of sacrifice, that's like the most important holy place in the world, and it's going to be destroyed. So it's not just the stones, it's not just the blocks, it's not just even the sacrifice and the worship that's there. And that's where the Epistle of Hebrews, running parallel, starts reminding us and starts pointing out what the temple truly meant. Not what it was built of, but what it meant. There's a really fantastic interaction in one of C.S. Lewis's Narnia books. It's the third book. It's Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And it's between a little smart-alecky kid from our world, and he actually gets the chance to meet in Narnia, in this other world, a living star. Be able to talk to this guy, and a little smart-alecky kid who's now, he's been transformed, and he's not the same rotten little kid he used to be, but even he sort of doesn't know what to make of talking to someone who is a star. Like that was his job, up in the heavens, to shine. And he says, kind of how interesting it is, because in my world, the world that has England and us and everything else, a star is a ball of flaming gas, there in outer space. And the star says, my son, even in your world, that's what a star was made of. That's not what a star was. And think about that for a second. Now, star, I'm not saying that stars aren't balls of flaming gas. This is not an astrophysics sort of issue. It is, but it's not only that. It's so much more. It's never less than what it's made of, but consider, throughout human history, we have looked at stars in the heavens and we've been inspired. We've looked at stars in the heavens and we felt very, very small, and we felt very, very great. We've looked at stars in the heavens and we've been able to navigate our way home. We've looked at stars in the heavens and it's inspired us to write love poetry. It's inspired us to reach and to strive for something more. Well, they're just balls of flaming gas. Yeah, that's what they're made of, but that's not all they are. That's not what they need. The temple was made of these big, giant blocks of stone, impossibly large, incredibly sort of profound and holy and impressive, but that's not what the temple really was. It's only what it was made out of. Yeah, it was a place for sacrifice, and they would come and they would sacrifice different animals and seek atonement for sin and forgiveness and recompense and all that kind of stuff. It was a place to encounter God's holiness, but that's not all it was. It was more. It's not less than those big magnificent stones. It's just something more. Right? The Hebrew says it's a copy. It's a reflection. It's a shadow. It's pointing us to something else. There is another temple, a real temple, made of something that is more durable than rock. Something that will last longer even than stone. It exists in heaven, in the mind of God. A perfect temple that any earthly temple, no matter how big and beautiful it is actually pointing towards. As an incomplete copy, as a shadow, as a reflection. Everything that they did in that temple was in kind of preparation for an eternal temple with a single high priest. No more sacrifices of animals day after day after day. One sacrifice on the cross of his own blood, good forever. And in a temple that will last always. With something more durable than stone or rock. It's made of people. It's made of us. It's made of his body. It's a temple that everything that we do here on earth is it's like something we're hoping and longing for, and it's our best representation of that which is true, that which is eternal, and that which will last. The temple, it was made of those big blocks, but it meant something else. It meant that our hearts were intended for a temple that would never be destroyed. For a temple where those stones would never be knocked down. Where the sacrifice has already been accomplished. And the holy presence of God is always there. And we are always together and always with him. In addition to the temple having that sort of sacrificial function, there was a portion of it, kind of hidden way in the back, the Holy of Holies, and Jesus even references this, that it happens there within the book of Hebrews talking about it. It was the place where if there was anywhere on earth that the presence of God was clear, it was right there. And there was a time it was because it was the Ark of the Covenant. Ten Commandments, all that stuff was actually right there. And then, whether it's the Shekinah glory of God or whatever it might be, but this place, this spot that was so holy, that was so powerful, that was so close to God's own presence, they had to cover it over with a big giant curtain, floor to ceiling. You couldn't go back there, it was too much. Once a year, the high priest would go back there. And even that was considered dangerous. Well, when the temple was destroyed, where the location of the Holy of Holies was lost. They can kind of, sort of, maybe guess where the dimensions of the temple would have been. All that stuff was covered, if it wasn't carried away, it was covered under sand and dirt and rock for generations. Well, observant Jews will not go up to the Dome of the Rock, where there is an Islamic mosque built over the general location of where the temple was. They won't go. And it's not because it's Islamic. They won't go because they don't know exactly where the Holy of Holies used to be. And they don't want to step on it on accident. They wouldn't show that kind of disrespect to the presence of God and to his glory because they don't exactly know where it used to be. That's how important, that's how profound. Think of a place, the holiest place on earth. That's what they thought, and even now, they won't walk up there on a patch of dirt or grass just in case. It used to be there 2,000 years ago. Well, consider our great high priest as he makes that one sacrifice that's good for all. He dies on the cross. What happens? What are some of the descriptions that happen? the earthquakes and the sky is darkened. You remember what happens in the temple? What happens? There's a curtain and it's torn. It is torn in two. That's the same curtain I talked about a minute ago. It goes from floor to ceiling, this big heavy curtain, and its intention is to separate the Holy of Holies from everything else. That's why it's mentioned in the Gospels. Not because it was like a really pretty curtain and they were sad, but because it was so holy and so important that the presence of God needed to be kept from the people. It was too much for them. And there on the cross, Jesus dies. He makes that sacrifice in his own blood, good for all. And the temple curtain is torn and it's gone. The presence of God is no longer hidden away or protected from us. The presence of God is here. It's now here. It's now open. And he's drawing us to it. We can look at the stuff then. We can look at the outsides. We can look at drawings, we can look at the histories, we can even go to the place and touch the rocks and the stone. We can even build churches, celebrate a Eucharist with bread and wine, and all of these things mean something more than what we see. They're not less than that. The cup is always a cup, the plate is always a plate. The bread is always bread, and the wine is always wine. But they mean even more. That underneath it, in ways that we can't see, in ways that we can, Jesus is present. The glory of God is here. The stones point to an everlasting temple that exists within the heavens and in the mind of God. And all of these things say, our lives point to something more. Our lives point to something deeper. And our lives point to something that lasts. The hard things and the sad things, they will be wiped away. They will be redeemed in God's own glory. And the good stuff, we don't lose it. They themselves have been pointing to a true reality all this time. All these things we're going to give thanks for. We don't lose them in the face of God. We will finally see just how good they really were. And now they don't go away. And now they don't get lost or corrupted. They don't fall apart or break. They don't move away or get frustrated. But our lives, like the temple, pointing to something even more. I mean, these things are real. They're a part of our life. We're made of a lot of these relationships and these circumstances and everything else. Our life, but it's not less than those things. It's more. It's more. They point to something deeper and something eternal, and something that lasts. How do we know? Because God has promised. He's promised that it means more. He's promised that this isn't the end. He's promised that the hard things and the suffering and even the death are not the end, and the good things will find eternal life in Him, just like we will. God Himself has promised that this is just a time of preparation and a shadow of what will come and be real and eternal and be forever. And that's a promise we can take to the bank. That's a promise we can take to the grave. That's a promise we can take even beyond, because God keeps His promises.